They're coming to get you, Barbara Shelley, in Village of the Damned that's upside down. Let's try that again. Hello and welcome to Horror Month 2020, and in this video I'll be talking about the film Village of the Damned. It's the Village of the Damned, which was released in 1960. 1960 this was made. This is a British film, I'm assuming. At least it was made in Britain. And I've never seen it before, which I hope most of the films I talk about for Horror Month 2020 will be films I've never seen before. But I'm intrigued to check this one out because I have seen the John Carpenter remake, and I loved it. I loved the story, I really liked the execution, and I said in my John Carpenter movie marathon that I would be intrigued to see the original because I could see a black and white kind of legit British version of that story being even more chilling and more, I don't want to say believable, but maybe a bit more, not even realistic, but I don't know. I feel like it might be a bit more legit, you know, in a British setting, real British kids, black and white. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to checking this one out and tick it off my list of films I own that I've never seen. So this is another episode of Conquering My Collection, which will be all I'm doing, I suppose, throughout this Horror Month. If you haven't seen my introduction to Horror Month for 2020, then check that out as I go over some of my very loose criteria and guidelines for what constitutes a horror movie, but this very much does. So let's get right on with it, check out, you know, what this thing's all about. I know the story, obviously, but I don't know how it's going to be presented exactly, and I have a feeling it's going to have a much different twist and flavour to it, just purely based on the fact that it was made in the 60s, and the fact that it was made in Britain, I think, is going to make all the difference. And while they might be very similar as two different films, I think that, again, the difference is probably going to be quite noted. So I'm going to check it out and tell you what I think. Alright, I am done with Village of the Damned, 1960. Only an hour and 17 minutes long, this one, so it was quite a brisk watch, and I was wondering the more that the film went on, like how much of the story are they going to cover, because obviously I've seen the John Carpenter remake, so I knew all the beats of the story. I didn't know whether they were going to rush anything, and it didn't really feel like they did, but I do feel like because this is so short, the remake just has a lot more time to sit with everything and build characters, I guess. But I will say, like I was expecting, this film definitely has that British flavour to it. It just has a different spark, and there is a chilling nature to these kids. And I haven't even talked about the story, so the story revolves around a small village. In this film it's called Midwich, and basically people just start dropping. Not dead, but they start dropping. They just fall unconscious, and it's in this specific area of this village. So literally gets to a point where people are investigating because no one's getting back to them on the phone in this village, and they go down this country road, and once you get past a certain point you just drop down unconscious. They even get a soldier out there with like a gas mask on, doesn't matter, he just falls down unconscious. There's a moment where a guy is there investigating, and he's got a plane flying overhead, and he's like on the radio saying, "Can you see if there's anything moving in the village?" And he's like, "No, there's people there, but no one's moving. They're all stood still, or they're all fallen over." And the man on the radio says, "Well, fly lower, see how much lower you can get." And at this point, he's already seen that gas masks can't even combat this thing. And so that to me at the beginning was like a very stupid move, because why even risk it when the guy's in the plane? And sure enough, the guy soars lower and lower, and he falls unconscious and crashes his plane and dies. So that served him right, didn't it? But the opening section of this film, the first like 15-20 minutes, excellent. I loved the moment when the main character, George Sanders, who's a great actor, and he's been in many films. He's on the phone and he falls unconscious. That's our first hint that something is wrong. We see that his dog is unconscious as well, and then animals are affected too. So Yeah, so that's our first hint, and then we see all these little shots of people around the village in various states of unconsciousness, and like keeled over like a kind of basket of fruit, or fallen, collapsed inside the post office, a tap that's running overflowing the sink. Leave that in for free. And yes, I loved all the little cutaway shots, and there's like no music, very quiet, very still. And I have to say, the camera work in this film is excellent. There's just like, I guess I wouldn't expect it from a 1960s film, especially from the UK, but there's some really nice, like, camera work going on. The cinematography is excellent in this film. I really enjoyed it. The black and white really added something to this story, I think. I don't know. There's a chilling element to the story that black and white really just seemed to service well, I thought. I really liked that. And so that the opening was just done really well. I love that opening. It's such a great hook, where there's literally like a scene on the city limits, which is exactly the same in the remake, where they can't get past a certain point. But then after an hour or so, people just start waking up. But then all the women in the village become pregnant, which causes problems. And there's young girls who've never had sex before, and they're kind of traumatized over this. And then there's a woman whose husband's been away for a year, and he comes back and she's pregnant. So it causes a lot of issues, and then the babies are born, and it becomes readily apparent that there's something not quite right with these children. Then it's linked to this event that happened months before, and the babies grow at an alarming rate. And I was wondering how they'd handle it in terms of the time frame, because obviously you need to get to the point where you have the kids in a group. They start to kind of group together. Is this kind of hive mind, and they kind of have this hive mentality where they all experience their own experiences, and they kind of learn from each other intuitively and through their minds, and they all have blonde hair. So I was wondering, is it going to say like 2 years later or 6 months later? But there's none of that, no title cards. I don't think there's any in the John Carpenter film either, but it's just really cleverly, and I always forget the word to use here, concisely done. No, that's not the word I'm thinking of, but it's very conservative. I don't know. It just really makes the most of the running time and doesn't waste a single second, it feels like, to the point where the next scene begins, and it is like 6 months later, but just like a stray line of dialogue will kind of clue you in on just how long it's been since the last scene. So from cut to cut, we could be moving forward in time until, of course, we get to the kids, and they're like, they look about 8, 9, 10 years old, and you can assume they're probably a little bit younger than that based on their accelerated growth, which is established early on even when the women are pregnant. The doctor's like, well, it's strange because she's 5 months pregnant, but it shows that she's 7 months pregnant. And I really liked all that stuff, even though there's a lot of scenes where it's just men sitting around at tables talking. I loved it when it became apparent that the kids were a threat, and that there's something bigger going on, and they've heard these other stories of incidents around the world where children have all been born on the same day, and bad shit has happened. And it's kind of like it's showing them what could happen with their situation. And later on in the film, they get word that a Russian settlement, which had the same incident and same children born, they got into some bad shit. And I loved how you just hear this story secondhand, and the way that it's written and performed in a very quick scene. It really, I don't know, it just elevates the whole situation. It gives you this glimpse and a taster of what this situation that we're watching in the film could devolve into. They say that the kids in Russia, they attempted to move them out, with the military, and it didn't go well. Like, they don't get into specifics, they just say it didn't go well. The military came in and nope, not a good plan. So they sent basically an atomic bomb and just completely destroyed this village. Just wiped them out, nuked them from orbit almost. It was the only way to be sure. And it's a really heavy moment when you're like, holy shit, that's how bad it gets. And so we don't get to know the kids very well. I feel like in the Carpenter version, there's just more time. But I do appreciate how this is a very brisk film, and it doesn't feel too short, but it feels like it could have been a little bit longer and it could have developed a little bit more. Another thing I'll say is that the mother, who I'm assuming is Barbara Shelley, I don't recognize many of these actors. Some of them I do, but I'm assuming she plays the mother of David. Now George Sanders, his character, he has one of the children with his wife, and I really loved the scene when she told him that she was pregnant. It was really, there was never a moment where she said, "I'm pregnant." The woman at the shop was kind of like, "You seem to have a craving for these pickles," and she's like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Well, I think there's going to be some news from their household coming soon," and then she goes and tells him, but she doesn't exactly say, "I'm pregnant." I love the way that she put it. His reaction was really sweet, and he's a bit older than her, and he's so happy about it, but then that happiness slowly kind of just gets chipped away as they realize that I mean, there's an almost just heartbreaking moment, maybe near the end of the film, when someone says, "Well, David is your son," and George Sanders' character just says, "Well, she's my wife's son. I have no proof that he's my son." And that's kind of like, oof. And then you see the wife at the top of the stairs, and that's the thing. I feel like the wife character, she could have been in the film more. I felt like she was kind of pushed to the side because George Sanders is the one who's kind of like, he has a vested interest in the fact that David is his son, and for all intents and purposes, and also someone that is a part of this group and this kind of hive mentality going on with all of these kids. And he recognizes there's a problem, but obviously he has an emotional attachment because it's his son, again, for all intents and purposes. But he also is, I'm not sure if he's a scientist or a professor. I think he's a professor. But he's kind of, he's a very smart, knowledgeable man, and he is part of the discussions with military and also kind of local government of what do we do with these kids, and they want to lock them away. And he says, "Give me a year to teach these kids or try to wrangle this power that they have. Maybe this could be like the answer to all our problems." And I actually really like that scene as they all consider the possibilities of what's going on with these kids. Is it like a mutation? Is it something more? They talk about how they at this point in time were sending, signals up into space and bouncing them off the moon, and that maybe a signal had come from another point in the universe where their technology was a lot more advanced, and that's what's caused these things, and they're essentially aliens. But the way that they discuss it is so frank, and because it's in this like these rich, like baritone British voices, it doesn't sound as outlandish as it actually is, and I just enjoyed that scene quite a bit. There are moments where the kids will glare at people and their eyes will glow and they can make people do things. And there's some kind of quasi-ropey effects where they kind of like very crudely cut off half the screen, and whenever the kids' eyes glow, they just freeze frame it. And so the Blu-ray looked fantastic, by the way, and there's lots of grain in the image, but when it kind of freeze frames, the grain just freezes, so it's kind of a bit jarring. I think maybe on DVD it would be less noticeable, but on Blu-ray it's the effect of pausing the film essentially to do the eye effects, which sometimes were misaligned, but for the most part were pretty well done. Another thing I like about the film is that there are some pretty dark moments in terms of deaths that happen, but they're very carefully handled. There's a one man who goes after them with a shotgun, and they stare at him and make him shoot his own head off with a shotgun. You never see it. You never see the gun go off. You never see the remains. You see other people looking at it in horror, and the build up to it, and the camera angles. It's just like it's really nice what you can do when you have constraints on you. I'm sure that they needed to keep, especially in 1960, they couldn't do things that extreme, or if they did, then it would be difficult to get the film released. This is rated 12 for moderate violence and horror, but the violence is kind of what takes place off screen. And things that you do see are kind of vehicles that will crash and explode, and you don't really see the details. So I know, I just appreciated the creativity of how they conveyed some of those more violent elements of the film without really showing you too much. I quite like that. Yeah, overall, I really liked it, actually. I'd have to watch the Carpenter film again. It's difficult when you watch the remake first, I think, that film definitely has just more time for things to develop, and also the in that film, I think the main character's son is called David again. I think I'm not no it's the no it was Linda, is it Kowalski from Crocodile Dundee? It was her son who was David. I think I can't remember, but you know there was a character called David who's this boy who isn't quite as in tune with the other children, and there's a sense that maybe he isn't as emotionless as the other kids, and so that there's more of a hook there. Whereas in this film, they're all the same. Definitely, I would bet money on the fact that the voice of David in this film is an adult trying to do a young voice, but also probably reaches a level of enunciation that's probably more fitting to the character the characters are supposed to be very smart and intelligent, far beyond their years. And I think David is the only character who speaks from the children. But you can tell by the mouth movements that it's not the actual kids saying it. But you know, the kid's definitely mouthing all the lines and everything. But it has an otherworldly feeling to it when you have that kind of, you know, it's trying to sound like a young voice, but it's an adult doing the voice. So it's kind of, it has that kind of eeriness to it that's quite, you know, it's kind of off center, which kind of fits, I think. It's a fairly extended kind of sequence with this this kind of I don't know if it's a Chinese box. I think he said it's an Oriental device. It's like just a little I forget what you call them. It's like a little wooden box, and you know it looks like there's no opening, but it's like a puzzle box. And they focus on that puzzle box for like a good 5 minutes of the movie, but it's kind of showing this point of how the kids all learn the same thing, even if they're not, you know, in the same room, and they have this kind of connection in their minds. Anyway, I like the dread that it builds very slowly as you begin to realize that these kids, they're just going to continue to spread out and colonize. I mean, at one point David says, we're going to colonize, you know, and I love the scene when he says, I want to speak to Father. And so George Sanders and his son David, they're in the room, and the kid just lays it all out like, you're going to see to it that we spread out and colonize, and you're going to make sure we have no problems and all this. And it's like, holy shit. And then he leaves and he turns around and he's like, goodbye, Father, with a little grin on his face, like, you little shit, you know. I loved, I won't spoil it, but if you've seen the film, I loved the use of a brick wall. That was a very nice touch, brilliant way to kind of visualize for George Sanders' character to visualize, you know, how they can't get through to these kids, and it's like trying to get through to a brick wall, but then using that as a device for the ending of the film, which when it clicked, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot. So yeah, I just really like this. I really did. It's a really good film. Definitely one to watch again, especially with the length, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just the British sensibility to it was just different, and I enjoyed that about it. And again, the camera work was, it's not like it's not like over the top or anything, but it was quite surprising in how dynamic some of that cinematography was for 1960. You know, just some nice subtle camera movements there at times, and angles, and again, especially towards the end with the kind of brick wall sequence, kind of mini sequence, layering of different images on top of each other was quite nicely done. And that's about it. So there we go. That's kicking off Horror Month for 2020. I thought it'd be easy to do this with short videos, but it's me, and when I get in front of a camera, I just keep talking and talking and talking, blah blah blah. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you with day 2. Again, don't know how much I'll stick to doing these every day, or if I'll stick to doing single videos. I might do a roundup at the end of every week or something. I'm not sure yet, but I'm excited. I'm excited to get to more of this stuff. You know, it's just nice to, as the title of the series is, conquer my collection and just get a Blu-ray done. You know, that's one film done from the collection. And as Agent Cooper would say, the sage words from Special Agent Dale Cooper, a path is formed by placing one stone at a time. So one more stone has been placed on the path to conquering my collection. And just quickly, before we end the video, I thought I'd show you a quick look at the Blu-ray in a little bit more detail. Not too much, but this is the HMV Premium Collection Edition. So it comes with a nice slipcase. Same artwork on the inside. This is actually spine number 100 of the premium collection. See my steady hand there. Let's get a bit of focus. There we go. And on the inside you get some art cards and a nice inside artwork there of the children. Let's take a look at the cards a second. So we have the original poster there. I really like this, it's very cool. But remember, this is not for resale or redistribution, promotional use only. Okay? And we've got a still here of David and his mother. They're still there with the children. And then finally, one with George Sanders. And basically the four main, I was going to say human characters. I guess they are the four main human characters, but you know what I mean. What I didn't realise is that it even comes with a poster, which is funny because I quite like that that poster image. So, wow, awesome! Really, really cool. Don't know if I'd ever actually hang it up or anything, and when it's folded like that, but I don't know. It's, yeah, I can't really get it all in the camera frame, but it's very, very nice. I like that they included that. I'm glad they did rather than they didn't. Anyway, so that's the Blu-ray. I just thought that being an episode of Conquering My Collection, I'd just show you it in a little bit more detail. So there you go. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you with the next one, which should be the next horror film for this month. Goodbye. Beware the stare.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.